All right, so welcome everyone to Kopernik Observatory and Science Center, and welcome to those watching virtually on YouTube today. So today's program is going to be on electric vehicles once again. Maybe you got the chance to see the one over the summer, and we might do some review there too. First, as always, I'd like to touch base on some Kopernik activities coming up. We are continuing to roll out our Friday night program schedule. More than likely next week is going to be an observing night, so a clear-only event. And hopefully that means we'll actually get clear skies for once, because we haven't in the past few weeks here. We've had pretty poor luck. We are continuing our summer camp registration here. We actually have filled up a couple of camps already. And there are flyers out in the lobby for both grades, entering grades 2 through 6 and entering grades 6 through 12. You can pick those up. There is a paper registration form on the back to learn more about pricing. You could use this to register as well, but you'll get the most accurate information by going online. So that's what we recommend. That way you'll know for sure whether the camp is still open or not. Of course, we have our presentation for today listed here. And next week, I think or 2 weeks from now rather, we do have a program running during the spring break for girls entering grades 3 through 8 called Girl Power Science Sound Studio. So if you know anyone, maybe register for that class. There's our Kopernik Friday Night programs. Race to the Stars is coming up, and I believe we have perhaps a few spots left for that one as well. As always, I like to get the update. One of these days, we're going to get clear skies. Oh, look, Saturday's kind of clear, of course. But here's Friday. The white, of course, is cloud cover, heavy cloud cover, and as you get closer and closer to a dark blue, that's where you'll get clearing. So there's some teal in here, not ideal. More likely, we will not get much from the sky tonight. But we'll keep an eye out after the program. If we have a clearing, if we have partly cloudy skies, we'll do our best to get something in the scopes. Right now we have them closed up just in the case of precipitation. So this is what you want to see though, dark blue. We'll look out for that next week. Okay. Back to home page. So we'll continue to post our public programs here. This is also a great place to access our previous live streams. And we have been continuing the hybrid in-person events and virtual events on our YouTube channel. So you can access all those programs here, watch the recordings from them. They go way, way, way back. Or you could go to our YouTube channel. That's also where you can find all of our videos. Last week, like we did our Spring Skies public program. The week before that, we had our story of pi. So those are available to you. Or actually, if I reload this page, you'll see we are in fact live. So this program is streaming to our virtual audience. You can hit, subscribe to the channel for the latest updates. We are excited for some upcoming observing live streams, which we like to do as well. Especially, we're going to cover the lunar eclipse that's coming up in May. I think that's May 15th to the 16th. That'll be a total lunar eclipse. And it will be viewable here. So if skies are clear, I imagine we're going to try and push a public event that day. If not, I'm gonna try and hunt down a spot to go see it so we can deliver it over YouTube at the very least. Okay, so that's our YouTube page. I will actually go way back in time here to show you this is part, the one we did in July, I think it was July 17th, that was part 1, and this is part 2 of our exploration into electric vehicles. So that is somewhere here. Should have had it loaded up. That's false, guys. We got to go further than that. Here it is. The EV Experience, we called it. So that is an hour-long program plus a Q&A session there. You're welcome to go back and watch that recording. we will have a Q&A session at the end of this program as well. So I think without further ado, we can jump into today's presentation. I'll make sure my clicker works here. Go full screen. All right, so we're calling this one an electric revolution, and that's the future of EVs. Now this is among several electric revolutions, a larger electric revolution that's happening now throughout many industries, because of course our goal is to electrify as much as we can to wean ourselves off of fossil fuel use and decarbonize. So this is only one portion of electrification. We're going to, we could focus on more. We actually have focused on more from previous programs we've run here at Kopernik from various presenters, but today is going to be continuing this idea of electric vehicles and how they're going to grow. And my name is Jeremy Cartie. I'm a graduate student in Sustainable Energy Systems at SUNY Cortland currently in my last semester, so yay. Let's carry on here. So previously on the EV experience, we're going to do some review here. These are the myths that we dispelled and we worked to during the course of the program. We talked about how EVs, despite what you might see in the news sometimes or in social media, chat rooms, so forth, EVs are not worse for the environment. Sort of a scapegoat concept that the oil industry really likes. EVs are expensive. As of right now, yes, but I think that's just the case for all of the auto industry right now. That the market is unfortunately high-priced. So yes, EVs are expensive, and the used market of EVs is also pricey. But ideally, in the future, once things calm down, we'll be back to our regular flow and bridge that gap, that price gap. EVs don't have the range. There's an EV that came out with 510 miles of range. So that's getting better. There aren't even enough charging stations. There aren't enough charging stations. We'll update you on the local status of charging stations in the area. It has improved since the last time we spoke. They charge too slow. With these new chargers that are continuing to roll out across New York and across the states, we'll talk about how much faster they can charge with the new EVs that are coming out. The batteries degrade quickly. When we focus on battery technology later on, we'll talk about how that's going to continue to improve, but all EVs currently coming out have, at the very least, an 8-year battery warranty, if not beyond a 10-year battery warranty. And then the power grid can't handle everyone switching to EVs. And that's a common misunderstanding of how the grid ultimately functions, how you can scale up the grid. And we'll also talk about a new technology today that focuses on continuing to scale up and improve using EVs themselves. So we talked about those last time, and we'll continue to elaborate and provide evidence that these are truly myths. All right, so let's review the last session. So for those that weren't here or didn't watch the recording or so forth, this is what we talked about. Most of it was from my perspective, whereas today is going to be a larger view of electric vehicles. So this is the one I drive. It's super quiet, although it does make a fun spaceship noise when it drives. I'm sure you've heard them with plug-in hybrids too. They make a very interesting hum. And it's kind of important to have that, because otherwise they are extremely quiet. The only noise comes from the tires otherwise, and at low speed you can't really hear them. So it's important that they add some kind of artificial sound. Okay, they have instant torque. With internal combustion engine vehicles, your torque curve goes up. You know, it's a regular curve. And the steeper it is, you know, the more expensive the car you need to access a steeper torque curve. With electric vehicles, just by the nature of the motor drives, I mean, think about using even just a drill, right? You can access that immediate torque just by pulling down hard on the trigger. Same idea with EVs. It's just a immediate scale up. Your almost linear scale to your torque capacity. My car has about 216 foot-pounds of torque, so I get that right away as soon as I push the pedal down. Smooth acceleration. A lot of cars are decent at this anyways, but EVs just by nature they don't switch gears. It's all, again, going back to that drill analogy. It's a nice smooth curve as you bring it up to peak acceleration. No gears. They have regenerative braking, which is pretty critical to gain a higher range in EVs. You're actually replenishing the batteries by slowing down. That's by just using the motor as a generator. You're pulling the kinetic energy away from the tires and using that to charge the battery. So you can, my best example, one of the biggest benefits I saw was, in my previous gas vehicle, I would drive up here multiple times a week, and boy, did that really bring the tank down, because it's a steep hill. But in driving up with my EV, it's the same thing. I might lose, depending on the time of year, 5 to 10 miles of range driving up this hill. That's only 2 miles. But going down, I regain some of that, up to 40%. I regain from going back down the hill and just using those regenerative brakes the whole way down. They have a low center of gravity, which is great for handling. There's this drive-by-wire that a lot of them use. Not all of them. Some have the traditional lever, but I just feel like this completes the idea. Oh, this is all electrified. I haven't experienced major range anxiety. It's not. There's been the occasional case where I either just forgot to charge and I had to find a solution, but it's not like a daily thing. On my daily commute, I'm not worried about it, and it's fun to drive. That has to do with the low center of gravity, the smooth acceleration, the torque. Even though this isn't a performance vehicle by any means, by their very nature, electric vehicles are just fun to drive. Okay. Now here's how we charge. Charging at home. This is actually the door to my garage. And this is the outlet I use to plug in my electric vehicle supply equipment, which is this right here. So this is our level 1 charging. It's 120 volts, just the standard outlet rating. You get 1.4 to 1.6 kilowatts from that, and that translates to 3 to 5 miles per hour. That is excruciatingly slow. That means 0 to 100% in 24 hours. So, I mean, if this is your only solution that you have, it'll work. But you'll drive it for the week, do your daily commute, and then charge up maybe on the weekend over a 24-hour period back to 100. Ideally, you don't really want to be charging to 100 all the time, though. You want to be charging to 80%, which for a standard around 20, 30-mile daily commute, it's not. Round-trip commute, that's not so bad. You'll be fine at charging to 80%, but that has to do with battery health. It's the same reason why your smartphones now have a battery health charge algorithm that will charge it up to 80% and maybe top it off when it thinks you're getting up in the morning. Just for lithium-ion health. So level 2 is another option that you can have installed in your garage, even outside your house. That's 240 volts. It's up to 19.2 kilowatt hours, and that's typically 10 to 30 miles per hour. So 10 to 30 miles of range per every hour of charge. So that's pretty good. That means that you can charge to 100% overnight. And if you have a garage or the ability to charge, install one of these outside your house and plug in your car, this is perfect because your car usually isn't going anywhere overnight, right? So that works. Then you have your EV infrastructure. what you can find out and about in the community. And this is continuing to improve. There's level 2 stations all around the map. Again, 240, same figures we saw before. This is where things get fun, though. This is where what will help you on road trips. This is great for your daily usage. Level 3 is for your long range stuff. And for backups if you forget to charge. So this is up to 800 volts. Up to 350 kilowatts. And that translates to 10 to 80% in 18 minutes for the newest EVs that are now on the market. It's funny, last time we ran this presentation, I had to change this because those EVs weren't out there, but now they are. So you can charge 10 to 80% in 18 minutes, which is entirely reasonable to me. It's not quite, a gas station trip, but it's short enough that, you can do a stretch break. Because this is destined for road trip scenarios, or in just general long-range scenarios, you'll want to go out and get a bite to eat, go on a stretch break anyways. Or ideally you should. It's good for your health and for driving safety. Okay. Next up, let's do a local update on EV chargers. This is the brand new one in Binghamton. Has anyone come across these at the new Mirabado in Binghamton? A couple of you. Very good. They're great. Let's have a look at them using PlugShare. PlugShare is a great tool to use even if you don't have an electric vehicle. It's very useful because it gives you a sense of how the market is growing, what kind of EV infrastructure is out there. There we go. This is personally, I prefer it in app form. Their website is just okay. It's made to be an application because that way, when you're on the road, you pull up your smartphone. Where's the closest EV charger? There it is. Let's go visit. Down here in Binghamton, let's see what we have. This will show us public level 2 charging stations and level 3. So down here is where that Mirabado area is, that sort of convenience store and gas station. It's like a big one. It has a drive-through. It's like very different. I've never seen one like it. So, that's where it's located, and you can see they're very fun at night. They glow nice green, very easy to spot. They're perhaps too bright. And these are the 350 kilowatt stations that will let you access that peak charge with the newest vehicles coming out today. My car can access maximum 50 kilowatts I've seen on it. But it charges you per kilowatt hour, not per minute. So that's good. I'm not losing money by charging at it. So it's not a terrible price either. It is still less expensive when you work out all the math. Less expensive than a equivalent trip to the gas station with an efficient vehicle. This is 35 cents per kilowatt hour plus tax. They are more expensive than charging at a level 2 at your house or a level 1. It's not cheap, but it is less expensive when you work it out. At home I pay about 12 cents, I'd say. That's the effective rate, at least. But you're ultimately paying for convenience there. That's what, because this infrastructure that they're installing, you should see the amount of transformers they have off to the side. It's very new technology, so you have to pay for it, unfortunately. We'll see how that adapts as time goes by. But this is not how you should charge all the time. Yeah, we can take a question, sure. You mean charging at this one? No, charging at your home. Yes, charging at home is part of your energy bill. Yep, part of your, because you just plug into your, if you're doing level 1, you plug into your standard outlet, Level 2, they do make supply equipment that you can plug into a 240 if you have it, accessible in your garage or something like that. But usually you get them installed right into your name is escaping me, your supply box. Okay, carrying on here. So that's a quick update. There is even another, the one that was under construction. This one didn't even show up on PlugShare when we last looked at it. The one that was under construction was at, I think, the Love's Travel Shop, which is a little bit further, more towards Kirkwood. They have those same chargers there too. But this one's more convenient because you just go all the way down Vestal Parkway onto the highway, and it's literally right there. Easy to turn into, you're good to go. They're going to put them along major highways because that's where it's going to make the most sense. It's not really something that you'll want to charge on. I mean, some companies, Electrify America included, that build these, don't foresee that setup being like a gas station style setup, being the permanent concept. They released an idea of having this sort of social hub, this lounging area where you can do a stretch, you can get some food, less gas station, more just moment to relax and charge for the 20 minutes. All right, so our previous conclusions on cost. Electricity is far cheaper than gasoline. At most, I pay about $10 per month for fuel costs. That's based on my need for the occasional use of those charging stations, or anytime I need to charge publicly on a level 2. But my day-to-day is usually done on a free public charger, a level 2 charger overnight. Now that won't always be the case, but while it's there and you have an EV, might as well make use of it. Your mileage may vary though with that $10 per month. We worked it out to be about $30 per month if you were just charging from home. And at that same estimated 1,000 miles driven on an EV versus a gas engine, you'd be paying $90 per month for gas. So it's about 1/3 the cost. Maintenance costs are negligible compared to, over a long term, compared to gasoline vehicles. Tires are really the only major concern. You're talking about far fewer moving parts, less can go wrong over the long term. It's actually about accounting for all the engine parts and the drivetrain. For a ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine, you're talking about 2 orders of magnitude difference between moving parts, 20 versus 2,000. And then ultimately, we decided operating costs are inexpensive, while the upfront costs can be greater compared to an internal combustion engine vehicle. This gap will continue to close, so the upfront costs of paying for an EV, actually buying one, will continue to get smaller, just as we see in other countries like Norway that we'll talk about later. Of course, the maintenance costs are minimal, and then your fuel costs are also 1/3 of your gasoline price. All right, then we talked environmental impact. So EVs have 0 direct emissions once they get on the road. So nothing's coming out of the tailpipe. Now you can have plug-in hybrids that you have 20 to, I think I've seen up to 60 or 70 miles of range on pure EV battery, and then it switches over to gasoline when you run out, at which point you are emitting. But while you're fully on EV battery, of course, you're not emitting anything, so those count too. How clean they are, of course, depends on their source of electricity after production. There is an initial carbon footprint or greenhouse gas footprint upon production for both the mining and development, or rather production of the battery, and then the construction of the car. But compared to an ICE vehicle, it's just a little bit more because of the battery production. It's not an insignificant amount, but they're very similar when it comes to their emissions at production. Because I mean, think about the amount of materials that go into building an engine. that's part of what we're talking about there. And then the drivetrain is very similar. So I guess I should say the chassis there. Now, this is a map of the United States showing you what you can expect your equivalent MPG to be driving in an EV. So here in New York, we talked about it's 306 miles per gallon in the most efficient EV. And that's, of course, because we have a lot of hydroelectric power here from Niagara Falls. So our energy is relatively clean here in upstate New York. You go down into New York City, they have to offset it with more fossil fuels. It's a larger population there. But you can see Midwest, even in the Midwest, you're talking still decent MPG. And part of the reason for this is because of the efficiency of battery electric vehicles. They can utilize the energy that gets pumped into them a lot more efficiently than the gasoline that's pumped into your ICE engine. You're getting more out of the power that you stored in that battery compared to gasoline. Just think about how hot engines get. A lot of energy that's coming from an ICE engine is lost to heat. So you could still, gain something from driving EVs in the Midwest. And as our renewable infrastructure improves, that will only get better. All right, so that was the most efficient EV. There was also a figure. Actually, now I can't. No, I did not include that in this one. If you're on a mid-tier EV, it drops down to like 250 in New York, 250 MPG. All right. We're going to skip that. Just making sure I'm on the right page here. All right, so now we're going to move into our new segment, which is talking about the future of EVs, how they're being adopted throughout the world, how we expect them to grow in the near future. So let's have a look at the energy prices to start with here. Because, part of some of the spike in curiosity for electric vehicles does have to do with the increase in gasoline price. So we're going to talk about how much does it cost to drive 400 miles on gasoline versus electricity over the course of several years. I think it's about a decade. So our assumptions here, we have an ICE vehicle at 34.5 mpg. An EV gets, the EV we'll focus on gets 4.5 miles per kilowatt hour. These are from my personal experience. So 34.5 mpg from my previous gasoline-powered car. I got about 400 miles on an 11.5 gallon tank. And this is my current electric vehicle. So that's assuming a 170 mile range on a 38 kilowatt hour battery. And our data sources for this, we have historical electricity prices from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and for gas prices from the U.S. Energy Information Administration. We're going to use national averages here, not focused on any particular state. All right, so let's have a look. So the blue line is your gasoline cost, and the green line is your electricity cost, again, to drive 400 miles on that given fuel source. You can see the electricity cost is virtually a flat line, hovering around that $12.50 mark. And then your blue line for gasoline cost fluctuates a lot. This is just a point to show that electricity prices are far more stable over time than gasoline prices. So you can see over in 2022 we're starting to reach highs that we saw in 2012. So I think this is a valuable visual for what we're discussing here. This 400 miles is your at least the car I drove is a tank of gas. So you'd have to pay right about now, around $37, $40 or so to fill your tank, versus around $12.50, $13 to drive 400 miles on an EV. Okay. So now we're going to jump into, we're going from prices to looking into the EV registrations by state. Sort of a jump here. But now we're going to start looking into how EVs are growing and how they might continue to grow as time goes by. So we have all the states on, including the District of Columbia. We have DC there too. And then the rest of we have the 50 states. And then how many total registrations they have. Now, at a glance, I mean, what is this really telling us? I mean, here's California. They have a ton of EV registrations because their market has been growing for some time, whereas other states are currently playing catch-up. Even here in New York, we're behind. Now, to some degree, we're not doing per capita here. This is based on population. California is a huge state. It has a large population. New York is around half, if I recall. But that doesn't make up for the discrepancy here. Clearly, something's going on in California that's different from the remaining 50 states. Because that is an outlier, if I've ever seen one, compared to the rest. All right. So we really want to ask, why is this happening? Why aren't the remaining states caught up here or matching California their EV registrations? So let's look at the global sales, and I'll explain some of this because I realize some of the text is tiny. This came from the International Energy Agency, and it's showing you global sales and sales market share of electric cars from 2010 to 2021. A similar range that we saw earlier for your gas versus electricity prices. Not that there's any major correlation there. So the orange line is showing you that global market share. I do quickly want to point out here, 2020 saw 4% EV market share across the entire globe. 2021 is above 8%. That's showing us a critical doubling. That points it's an early data point that is suggesting we may be on that road to exponential growth. Most analysts predict that EV growth will follow an S-curve. So that means you'll start off really slow when the technology is brand new, and then you'll reach an exponential growth period where you have a significant adoption of electric vehicles, and then it will start tapering off again. At what point it starts tapering off is going to depend on how prevalent they truly become, but that exponential growth is expected, and maybe we're starting to see part of it here. Now, I'd also like to point out that this is broken down by countries, so we have just a collective of other countries. The leaders in this are China, the United States, and Europe. Norway being a significant leader in EV adoption in Europe. So the green color here, that is your light green. I know it's hard to see. This is your light green. Then you have the dark green color for Europe, and the blue for China. You can see we are really behind here. We're growing. You can see, well, I mean, you could almost argue we're fluctuating, because you see there's a shrink in the market here, and then we're growing again here. More likely, we are going to continue the growth we're seeing from 2020 to 2021. But either way, we have not grown significantly in the past few years. we're definitely not seeing significant doubling. Like other countries, if you take China, for instance, that is a doubling. Europe is getting close to a doubling there. So we want to improve this because other countries are figuring it out. Let's see, I forget anything here. So we talked about the doubling. So okay, good. And we're carrying on to really focusing on one of the European countries I've talked about a couple times because they are kind of an outlier in this. That's why I keep bringing them up. They seem to have really figured out how to electrify. So let's focus on Norway here. Here's another plot showing projection. It's not just based on current data. It is projecting out data up to 2040. But we're well into 2022 now, and Norway is approaching 60% EV adoption. That is very significant. I mean, one of the latest figures was that 9 in 10 personal vehicles that are being sold in Norway are, at the very least, plug-in hybrid, if not full EV. So we'll talk about why this is and what they've done to really figure that out, how to get their populace to adopt electric vehicles. But you can see they've reached a point now that the United States is not even projected to meet by 2040. Granted, smaller country, they're a population of 5 million. So that does play a role. And there are many factors that will, being such a large country, it is going to be hard with, potentially families living in different states, from West Coast to East Coast. It's going to be potentially difficult to get people on board with this because you're going to question the range, you're going to question longevity. But whereas Norway is a relatively small country with much shorter commutes, and if you want to go visit family there, it's like crossing a state rather than crossing the entire United States, West Coast to East Coast. So those are the key points from this plot. A lot of countries are listed here. So we're going to focus on Norway now and how they got to that 60% or nearly 60% level. So why is Norway making this progress? Let's get into that. Well, the reasons for Norway's growth here. Just checking the time. So the Norwegian government set out on a mission to accelerate EV adoption. They made the decision, this is the way forward. They committed to that plan, and their legislation, the laws they made, went towards meeting their goals. So primary goal was to make EVs an affordable and attractive option compared to their ICE counterparts. So one thing they did is they invested heavily in infrastructure. They wanted to ensure an adequate amount of charging stations across the country. And being a small country, they also, in a smaller population, they also don't need as many. But they have such a high level of EV adoption now that they have had to learn, how do you grow this? How do you scale it up? At our stage, we have a lot of electric vehicle charging stations around, but we haven't quite needed to scale up because we're not seeing that doubling effect, that exponential growth yet. So they had to figure out how to grow their charging station market. And hopefully we will soon as well. Norway has a 25% value-added tax on their vehicles, but EVs, they exempted them from that tax. This is something that was put in place beforehand, but they exempted EVs. That's a significant addition to a vehicle's price. So if you see, okay, I have the option of buying this internal combustion engine vehicle, but there's this 25% value-added tax, and then you have your EVs that that's totally exempt. It helps to offset any larger cost EVs carry that they carry currently. Yeah, so that was the main point. Now, an EV buyer also does not need to worry about pollution taxes. Of course, they have zero tailpipe emissions, so any carbon taxes that are that exist in Norway, they don't have to contribute to that. They also have some quality of life benefits as well. You know, they don't, certain fees like, you know, bringing your car into a ferry, for example, those are waived for electric vehicles. Similar to how, you know, some charging stations are free. Those are examples of a benefit provided to EVs to sort of incentivize their growth. Well, I mean, that's another on top of it. I mean, that's part of the reasoning that they're moving towards it. So in the end, the government decided to incentivize this transition and make EVs competitive in our heavily subsidized oil industry. We see most of that subsidization here in the United States, and of course, it's only gotten worse in Europe with the current conflict, as far as their prices are concerned. They saw an opportunity here, is the main idea, and they bounced on it. They jumped on it. All right. So now we're getting into a little bit of projection here for the United States, focusing in a little bit more on that, because we currently are not incentivizing EVs effectively. There are some incentive programs. California, for example, does have more taxes against carbon pollution and pollution in general. So there's that factor coming into play. Then you have you know, your incentives in California. Now, I unfortunately don't recall how much they get applied. Of course, there's the $7,500 federal tax credit that we all can obtain if we reach the certain tax bracket level. But that's the thing. There's caveats here. There's caveats there. There's not just a baseline, okay, this is your incentive in all of the states. It's very sparse here and there. New York, for example, and if you are looking to get an EV, know that there is a $2,000 New York Drive Clean rebate that you can access at point of sale. So don't let the dealer tell you otherwise. That is yours to access at point of sale, whether no matter what type of purchase you're making. So we have that as an incentive here in New York. It does scale down if you get a plug-in hybrid or a hybrid. So the $2,000 is for full battery electric vehicle. But here's our projected growth. This comes from statistical data obtained by a website called EV Adoption. This is what they primarily study. It's a fitting name, I think. Now, this is from 2021 to 2030. And you can see we're going to breach above potentially the 30% sales share forecast, or sorry, excuse me, market share in the year 2030, which, going by just some the growth I've seen in the industry so far, this makes some sense that we could reach that 30% level, especially as some states continue to adopt that 2035 deadline for moving fully to battery electric vehicles for new cars. So New York has that law in place that all new cars sold after 2035 will be battery electric vehicle or some sort of plug-in hybrid. Those for personal vehicles. So this is the growth we're hopefully going to see, and I think this is realistic. We're right in the middle ground here. Hopefully this is what we can hit, because it will also help us hit our climate targets as time goes by. Okay. And this is for all the US, not just New York, of course. Alrighty. So with some forecasts out of the way here, now we know how EVs are expected to grow, how we might see, the United States continue to grow its EV fleet over the next decade or so. Now we can start looking into some future technologies that will pave the way for this continued growth. Because not only is the growth expected to be exponential, we're also supposed to see some potentially exponential innovation in both battery industry and grid technology. So it's a big moment, and I think it's something that the world as a whole can potentially meet to continue to electrify our infrastructure. So we're going to get into future technologies now. And this is broken down into three. We are going to focus briefly on battery technology, battery recycling, and vehicle-to-grid tech. And we'll talk, if you don't know vehicle-to-grid, the whole goal there is to explain it. Because once we reach a certain threshold of EV adoption, vehicle-to-grid is going to become critical for our power grid. Okay. So getting into battery technology first. So we could, this is always something you see in the news, especially. It's often, just one of those headlines that pops out at you. Says, "Oh, this next battery technology is going to be the wave of the future." And that's partially media hyping things up, but that's because there's so much research and development going into battery technology right now that those headlines are bound to pop up everywhere. So many different chemistries being tried, improvements to lithium-ion solid-state battery. We're going to talk about elaborate on those a little bit here. So EVs and electrification present new challenges that will catalyze innovation. It's just, think about, we're Kopernik, we love to talk about space. It's very similar to the space race. Climate change is this moment to try and innovate and invent to solve these real major issues we're dealing with. So EVs are a portion of that solution, not the entire solution by any means. You also have to incorporate the just electrified transportation as a whole, improving public transportation throughout major cities. The EV is not the be-all, end-all here, but it's going to be critical for solving some of our climate change problems. So we're going to hopefully catalyze this innovation. And our goals with battery technology are to improve range, improve charging speed, improve the weight of the battery. Like they talked about, going back to that very first video we watched, he talked about, I was surprised he said a couple of years, that we're going to have this major breakthrough where we can shrink the batteries down, better energy density. We'll see that pop up here in our goals. Reduce the weight and you get more range. That was a problem I'm sure he struggled with building his EV there in 1968. Was you have these, and you still have these gigantic batteries that are super heavy. Just because of the battery in an electric vehicle, they are substantially heavier than an internal combustion engine vehicle. And that's just due to the sheer amount of heavy metal you're working with there. Now, you also want to improve battery health. Battery health has come a long way, especially with temperature management. If you've heard about like the early Nissan Leaf, that was among the first electric vehicles, consumer-level electric vehicles you could buy. It did not have temperature management, temperature controls on the battery, which meant now, 10 years later, after being on the market for 10 years, a lot of their batteries are starting to degrade significantly. But if you apply and invest in some, which now all EVs that are on the road, or at least most that you can purchase, have some sort of temperature control on the battery. They'll last for a decade or longer. And once we get to battery recycling, we'll talk about how an EV's life, at the end of life being used as a vehicle battery, it doesn't mean it's the end of life for the battery as a whole. We might still be able to use that. So we're going to want to improve energy density here too. We're going to want to try and simplify the chemistry of the batteries where we can. Simplifying the chemistry using more common elements and compounds allows us to rely less on supply chains, global supply chains. If we can get most of our materials within our own countries, that's beneficial because you're not sharing a small rare earth element that's only located in this one region or mined in this one region. You can use simpler compounds and elements elsewhere. That's a big part of our battery technology growth. And of course, you want to reduce costs. And this has been happening over the past decade as EVs have become more prevalent. The curve is going down. The price of batteries are coming down. And that's part of the reason why you're starting to see EVs become more affordable. The battery is the most expensive component of an electric vehicle. So thankfully, we're starting to see some cost reductions there. And eventually, as that cost continues to plummet, more affordable options will come out. Of course, the dream is to have a new car, a new electric vehicle come out in around the $20,000 price range before any incentives or anything like that. All right, so here's a little bit more specific, getting some more specifics into battery technology. The two big ones that are on the market right now, called lithium iron phosphate, which is less common but growing, and lithium nickel manganese cobalt oxide, or NCM. That's something that, for example, that's what my battery is. These are both lithium ion technologies. But the one that's common here in the States for the most part is the NCM. I think LFP is gaining traction in China at the moment, but even Tesla is using it in some of their smaller range cars. That's starting to see some growth there. So those are just the chemistry behind the battery. And those are the ones that are on the market. LFP is less energy dense. So that means you have the same size battery between these two, LFP and NCM. You're going to have less range on this one. But it also has battery health benefits that allow it to last longer, through more charge cycles. So you weigh the cost benefit. If you have a target of, like I think Tesla, for example, will use these in their 260-mile range. If that's your target, and you can fit it in your car, and it's going to last longer, then that makes sense. But if you want to do anything higher range, then you'll have to look to this technology right now. Okay. So there we go. LFP batteries have lower energy density but last longer. And automakers, especially as more and more jump on board with electric vehicles, some of them have a bigger head start just because they invested either more in making their ICE vehicles more efficient, which certainly is admirable to some degree, or improving their plug-in hybrids and regular hybrids, improving the efficiencies there. We all make our gambles there. Where is the technology going to go? It seems like now automakers are all trying to jump on board EVs and trying to seek out the best chemistry, the best form it should take, even the structure of the batteries on the inside, trying to find what's the most efficient way for these chemical reactions to occur to both give you the best energy density, longer range, better battery health. There's a ton of R&D being funneled into solving those problems with lithium-ion technology right now. But there's this other idea called solid-state batteries, and we've definitely had programs on this before in the past. But this has to do with your lithium-ion. Actually, your materials are suspended in a liquid, in a gel. And solid-state batteries are exactly what they sound like. They're solid-state. I mean, a similar analogy with your mechanical hard drive versus a solid-state hard drive. Your solid-state hard drive has no moving parts. It's very stable. It's very fast. And that all translates to benefits for the end user, whereas your mechanical hard drive has its moving parts. It can fail more easily. It needs to be larger to accommodate more storage, so forth. So that's just an analogy to this. But you're still talking moving from something that's fluid, talking about fluid dynamics, to a solid-state battery that's more stable. That's a big part of it. As you know, lithium-ion batteries do have a tendency, especially when they're punctured, to explode. So that ideally, if you could mitigate that problem, it'd be great. And that's something solid-state batteries can help solve. They're lighter, because think about energy density. Just going back to your physics of solids, liquids, and gases, a solid is more condensed in most cases. So more energy density, stores more energy. It can charge faster. Well, that was another point I wanted to make here too with even lithium-ion batteries, is the cell layout and cell design is a big part of why we have such efficient and high power charging up to that 350 kilowatt level. It has to do with how the batteries are actually laid out in the circuit, as well as their just ability to take that sheer amount of power in. That's not something we had even a few years ago. We didn't have that 350 kilowatt peak charge for electric vehicles outside of Tesla. That's something they started to pioneer, was with that high power charging. Okay, so you have your solid state. ETA 2030, maybe? Hard to say. You never know when a breakthrough is going to happen. Maybe it's 2 years from now. I don't know. But that estimates, most analysts predict 2030 we might start to see the first electric car that uses a solid state battery of some kind. So that'd be the hope, and ideally it all translates to just benefits for the vehicle. Think about if you can get more energy and you can make it lighter, that's a ton of range that you can push back into the battery. And keep that in mind, as this battery technology improves, this is something that we can talk about more with the vehicle, the grid tech that's on the horizon. Okay. Carrying forward. Now battery recycling. This is a very hot topic in the industry. And we don't have a scalable solution yet. That's an important factor here. So the idea here, we have used, defective, and end-of-life EV batteries, and we cannot allow those to become waste. There's two. For one, they're actually valuable. Just because the chemistry no longer functions how it used to, there are multiple ways we can utilize that end-of-life battery that was originally used for a vehicle. Either we can reuse it elsewhere, or we can break it down. So we have some major options here. We can refurbish malfunctioning batteries. So you're never going to, if Chevy had their issue with their Bolt vehicles. That was a hot topic in the news, that they've had to recall a bunch of their vehicles specifically because of the battery. And now you ask, okay, what's going to happen to all of those batteries? And thankfully, they do have a partner that is taking those in and repairing them. So there is refurbishment happening there. So again, the components that are inside that battery are still incredibly valuable. So if you can fix them, that's the best first step. I mean, it's just like reduce, reuse, recycle, right? We can reuse EV batteries for power storage. And yes, okay, so if we reuse our EV batteries for power storage, this is something that, you know, if you have something to invest, this could become profitable for you. There's a couple of several circumstances where people have taken, in fact, those exact Nissan Leaf batteries that we talked about that have degraded over time. They might be about at 50% battery health. You know, on your cell phone, you can access battery health in your settings to see what is the status of your battery's current ability to charge. You know, if it's a new one, it's going to be 100% or 90% to 100. If you've had your phone for several years, you know, you might be at that 50 to 60% level. Same idea with EV batteries. They will degrade to a certain point. Doesn't mean they can't be charged up, but you're not going to be able to use it for as long. These are a great opportunity to use for power storage, because even take my EV battery, for example, is it's at 38 kilowatt hours, excuse me. So you're talking, even if it was at 50% at its end of life, after if I was to drive it for 10 plus years and then it's at that 50% battery health level, not useful for an EV necessarily anymore, but you could use, that's a 19 kilowatt battery at your disposal. 19 kilowatt hour. So you can reuse EV batteries for power storage and maybe make money. The couple of examples I've seen, you have this whole megawatt hours worth of batteries laid out in just a basic an industrial shed of some kind, and you have them directly hooked up to a solar array. Your batteries are linked up to the grid. So what you can do is you can, during peak solar time, where you can get the most solar energy down, you charge up those batteries. And then when you reach peak electricity hours, where the demand for electricity is the highest in that given area, and that means the cost of electricity is the most expensive, you funnel your power out into the grid. And you can make profit off of that. If you do, you'd have to build in an automated system to handle that, and you'd have to have some upfront investment. But that's what people are doing. They're able to profit off of this because they have that power storage at their disposal. EV batteries aren't the only way to do that. Some people are able to do it, just by pumping water up during peak, off-peak hours, and then during peak hours, running that water down through a generator to pump it back in to the grid during high demand. So it's not an uncommon way to profit off the grid. Now you can also, that's a lot of wind. You can also recycle EV batteries in a circular economy. That is the ultimate goal. When EV batteries reach a stage that they can't even be used for power storage, or if they're beyond defective, the materials inside the batteries, like I said, still carry a lot of value. You can use a lot of the rare earth metals that are in there, a lot of the lithium that's in there, and build a battery again. And because, if you have all this material, why bother go mine more out of the earth if you can just access it from a effectively dead battery? So that's what we mean by circular economy. In a truly sustainable model for electric vehicles, it'll just keep going around and around. You'll manufacture batteries from the start, maybe from mining lithium and so forth, and then once those batteries reach end of life, you'll pull that material out and make a new battery. And again and again and again. There is some loss there, but a lot of it can be reused. So that's your battery recycling. So now getting into this somewhat new concept, but it is being tested, especially in areas of Europe, because we have to test it in small communities first, and then you scale it up as time goes on. And in countries like the United States, it really doesn't make sense to implement this yet. Maybe in some smaller areas of California where there's large EV adoption, but beyond that, there's just not enough EVs on the road yet. So this is something we're thinking long term. Vehicle to grid. You can see our little grid icon there, and you're funneling electricity to charge your electric vehicle. But interesting, there's an arrow coming back, pumping back into the grid. Okay, let's talk about it. So as EV adoption grows and battery technology improves, the batteries become an asset to the grid. Again, this is all as we scale up. Our batteries grow and continue to improve. Our range improves on our vehicles. As an example, I probably wouldn't be comfortable applying my vehicle to this system because it only gets, in the wintertime, it's only getting 170 miles of range. So we'll talk more with respect to a vehicle with a smaller battery. The goal here is when we reach a point with large batteries in our grid, it works even better. And I think people will be more comfortable doing this. It's not something that will just come out of nowhere. Like you hook up your car and the next day you have like 50% battery, and you didn't. It just happened at random. It's something you control, so keep that in mind. So the idea here, we have energy from your EV's battery is getting pumped back into the grid during peak demand time. Because if you think about it, if you're at work, if you're at home, your car is just sitting there, it's plugged in, maybe it's at full capacity, it's not doing anything. Now, at an individual level, just one car, that really doesn't mean much. But a lot of cars are going to be in that situation where they have, let's say, even 80% charge. And maybe that equates to, on a next-gen EV, you have 300 miles at your disposal. You can ask, whether it be through an application, there's multiple ways that this could happen, whether it's just something you set up through your utility. Maybe you pump 30% into the grid. So you're going from that 80% level to the 50% level. And because you're offering that electricity to the grid, you could potentially get paid for it, especially as you incorporate maybe rooftop solar panels that are charging your vehicle. There's lots of ways that this can work for your situation at home. So again, ideally here though, the way that this becomes a truly sustainable model is if the EVs are being charged off of renewable energy. We're using the electric car for power storage. So during peak solar times, ideally your car is getting charged up with solar energy, and then during peak demand time when the sun sets, and everyone's at home running their devices, making dinner, all that stuff, they pull the energy back from the EV to the grid. Again, you could set the value. So maybe just, again, bring it down 30%. Don't go any more than that. After that, just keep my car at 50 because I'll need to drive to work the next day. You can't pull all the battery out of my car. That's the basic premise here. And you'll have this reservoir of cars around a community to store your power, because that's a big topic with solar panels, wind power. Of course, you can only collect solar energy during daytime when the sun's out. So if you're pulling all that energy from the sun, you have this huge array that's providing megawatts and megawatts of energy, and the grid doesn't need it at that time, where are you going to put it? Potentially, you'll store it in this reservoir of power storage that's available to us. Because again, otherwise, these batteries won't be doing anything. It'll be a waste of resources. And again, as we build up this sustainable world, we'll want to utilize all our resources as efficiently as possible. This is the idea behind vehicle to grid. Oh, yeah, that was the last point. I don't think I have it up here. Oh, well, yes. Right, we talked about how you could get paid from this too, depending on your electrical setup at home. The way it works in the small communities that are using vehicle to grid as testing sites, the application will, you set your percentage, what you want your EV battery to drop to, and it would give you some estimate of how much you'd get paid based on current electricity rates. So it would all be potentially done through a smartphone or an application like that. Now, the other nice part about this is it helps keep your battery healthy. This is my final point, in fact, of the talk today. So it helps keep your battery healthy because you do not, like I said earlier, you do not want to top off your battery at 100%. You don't want to keep it at that level. It's not healthy for lithium-ion packs. If your car is going to be sitting around a lot, leave it at 80 or lower. You don't want to leave it at 0%, but you don't want to leave it at its peak charge. And again, that's just like your cell phone. If you want to keep your battery healthy, you don't charge it up to 100 until you need it at 100. So, for example, if I'm going on a longer trip in my car, I'll definitely charge it up to 100 overnight. Because I know I'm going to start using it in the morning right away. But otherwise, try it. You keep it at 80. And the cool part about that is that usually you have some settings in your vehicle that lets you adjust how much charge you get in a given charging session. And the same idea applies here. You tell the grid how much power to pull from your car, and that helps keep your battery healthy because you're sub 100%. You could charge it to 100% on solar energy over the course of the day because you're going to push that energy to the grid, and maybe that makes you more money on top of things. So vehicle to grid, it's a new concept. It's going to be a growing concept, and it will grow in scale with electric vehicles as they grow with that exponential curve. It's going to happen in some capacity, especially in major cities. I'm sure it'll head into the suburbs as well down the line, but cities are a big opportunity for this because they have, during their peak demand hours, that's a fantastic opportunity to pull potentially renewable energy from those cars. All right, so vehicle to grid, battery recycling, and battery technology, just for some quick ideas of where this is all going. So at this point, we can transition into a Q&A session. And if either Ben or Sasha would like to check on the skies. Yep. Yes?
The electric vehicles, are they quite more expensive to insure because of the damage getting into an accident? It was all battery pack.
Sure, that's a great question. And I was a little bit worried about that getting mine. And it definitely depends on what model you get. Like Tesla's being the more performance, sportier car, it's going to be just like getting a sports car. It is definitely going to bump up your rate a bit. Now, incidentally, I had just turned, I think that year I had turned, 25. So I had that like slight bump down in my insurance. It was like, I don't know, I might have, they discounted me like $15. So when I got my EV that same year, it just bumped me right back to where I was. So I lost that discount, but it was only a $15 differential. It's because they're less common and there's obviously less servicing opportunity for those cars. It does bump your insurance up a tad bit.
And the other thing, I've been very interested in this for a while now.
Mhm.
But when I did some math, for a normal person to take the benefit of the $7,500 thing, you've got to have a heck of a tax bill.
Yes, you do. That's why I'm not super thrilled with the United States approach to the federal incentives. If we're going to do a widespread incentive program to push EVs across the country, that $7,500 tax credit only really benefits higher income individuals.
Should be on the front end.
Right. Exactly. Yep. So, yeah, I mean not hyper rich, but yes, the higher income brackets. Yes. Yeah, it is not the ideal situation.
Who pays for every congressman?
Yes, you're right. That's true. I guess let's get it. I guess we are branching off into the political. So.
Yeah, after a certain number of vehicles are sold, that goes away anyways on certain models.
Sorry, say again.
The 7,500 goes away
yes.
after a certain number of models are sold.
Yep. Yeah. The Teslas don't have access to it anymore, for example, because they sold that threshold of vehicles. So that's as more automakers continue to sell more and more EVs. As it's currently set up, eventually that will just go away because it's only meant to reach that threshold. So I mean that's not obviously. There's the possibility of improving those incentives in the future, and hopefully making them more accessible to everyone. Yes.
Did you buy your vehicle new?
Yes. The end MSRP on it was $20,000 when yes, because there were some crazy incentives on it. In fact, this particular vehicle, no, it was just whatever. I have a Hyundai. Whatever Hyundai incentives were running at the time, that was the price that was knocked off. I think the original MSRP was $35. I didn't, of course, see that up close, but because it was reported as 20. I will say it's a rare circumstance. You would have to look out for those deals right now, especially as we're currently in this wave of kind of mid-tier level electric vehicles that are more around the 40 mark. Hopefully, again, we get back down, we creep down as time goes by.
Keep your vehicle until your batteries. Most warranties that I've seen are at the 8-year or a certain percentage. If you keep the car and you want to replace that at your own expense, it's half the price of the car.
Yes, if your battery degrades, let's say you reach that 8-year mark and the next day somehow you're at 60% health, yeah, it's probably not worth it to replace the battery pack. But that's a rare circumstance right now based on the current battery health of those new systems that keep the battery healthy as you drive, keep it cool. Thinking back to that Nissan Leaf, as you drove around, that battery would just keep heating up, and if you're in the peak of summertime, even here, there's nothing to cool it down or manage its thermals. Now there is, and that's a big benefit to battery longevity. And that's why my particular battery pack has pushed into that 10-year guarantee mark. So that gives you some confidence that you keep it around for 10 years, at least your battery's under that warranty. Yes.
So I wonder with battery health, if you do, if you're doing road trips as more commonly, you have to charge it up to 100% more often. I drive between here and Kansas City 4 times a year.
Oh wow!
So,
yes.
While that's going on, obviously this isn't a practical solution.
Currently, no.
Once I'm permanently in a specific city, it's a better solution. So, yeah, I guess it's interesting there with the battery health. And I have done one road trip in my mom's Tesla. And that was in winter, so the battery was not as good as it would have been.
Right, you see that range plummet a lot. Yep.
But something to consider for sure. And then the question I had here for you was, if you're living in shared units, if you're living in an apartment, let's say, and you want to charge at home, how do you my experience, at least here with NICEC, for example, is that they are very unruly. So how do you get them to notice that, or to put the charge that's going to your vehicle onto your account versus someone else's?
Oh, I see. Yeah, so I'm in an apartment as well, but they seem to be set up where it's very individual. I have our individual NICEG bill. It's not connected, and so it's just like paying anything else. I have heard of circumstances where you have a more connected unit, and there I think it all comes down to working something out with the homeowners, or the what's the word I'm thinking of? Landlords. Thank you. So yeah, that comes down from there, and unfortunately, in a lot of cases, I've heard it's just not something they take kindly to necessarily, and hopefully that it's just something we get past down the road, because people living in apartments, it is a real issue. I had already purchased my EV before moving into an apartment, so my goal was to try and find one that had a garage, that had that outlet. I made sure I asked, but there was probably like only one or two in the area, 2 complexes that could support that. Now the other advantage, the other possibility is to find a level 2 charger that's close enough to home. That's something I do, just because I prefer the higher speed. I just bring it to a level 2. It's like 2 miles away, and leave it overnight. But even that's not ideal. The best circumstance is to just pull your car into your garage, plug in from your level 2, and you're charging overnight. But not everyone is going to be able to do that. Yep.
On
Yes.
very, very cold mornings, 0 degrees, can you heat your car? I understand it's hard to get your heat even to 70 degrees.
In my experience, I actually haven't had too much trouble, because my car in particular has a resistance heater. So basically just a space heater, right? Now, that means it pulls a ton of power away from my battery, unfortunately. But it does heat up really quick, just like a space heater does. Heat pumps are the ones that can struggle in very, very cold temperatures.
So some of the vehicles do have heat pumps.
Yep. A lot of them are, and in the end, it's the more efficient way to go to preserve your range as the day goes by. But you do, in very cold temperatures, it can.
Same thing that it reverses for an air conditioner.
Right, exactly. Yep, that's the idea behind a heat pump. Just like our geothermal heat pumps here at Kopernik. Yep, we're just pulling that heat from underground instead. Yes.
Yes, I happen to own an EV as well. I have a Mustang Mach-E, and I was curious about what we do in the winter. And for a lot of this winter, I have a garage, but it's cluttered. So I park it outside, and I have a level 2 charger, and I just plug it in. A couple of things that are nice about it, even when it's 0 degrees, if you just remotely tell your phone or use your phone to tell your car to start, it'll warm up for you, like a remote start sort of thing. If you're plugged in when it's warming up the car, it really doesn't tax the battery at all. It'll just use the power from the house or the car. But the other nice thing is, if it's in your unheated garage or outside, you can get in and it'll blow hot air within a few seconds, because the resistance heater just heats up like a hairdryer. It's almost instant. Whereas a combustion vehicle, you have to wait for the engine to get warm.
Right. Yep.
And that's kind of a big deal. The other nice thing is, if you have an unheated garage, you can warm up in the garage, and it doesn't heat in your house.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. That's I guess a similar experience. Although I don't always have mine plugged into that level 1. So I also have a hard time remembering to. Out of curiosity, how instant is can you tap your heat on? Well, remotely, I mean.
Yeah, so I can turn it on. It takes about 5-10 seconds for the app to talk to the car.
Okay. Yep.
But then, it'll blow hot air, and the car will be warm in like 60 seconds.
Right. Yeah. That with that resistance heater, that helps a lot. I'm just curious, because sometimes my app fails, and I think that's why I don't use it as often.
It's also I'm level 2, so if it wants 10,000 watts to warm up,
It can take it. Yeah.
do it.
Yep.
So I can also see with the charger how
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Very good.
You can always carry a generator in your trunk.
I know, right? I think I saw it I don't know if it was more of a joke or someone who was very serious, but I saw there was some video I saw where someone was charging their Tesla off a generator, and it's funny. Yeah.
Cartie showed us wasn't exactly that S curve. That was pretty linear, and Cartie showed the adoption out to 2030.
Oh, so it is much longer term, that S curve that they expect, because you're talking about when you get to 60, 70, 80%, not when you get to 30%.
So the world's got to produce a whole lot of lithium.
Right. And the lithium mining is certainly a real challenge to try and collect enough of it to support EVs across the entire scope of the world.
So it's got to be too, right? Mining in general.
Oh, of course, yeah. And of course, carbon intensive as well, because obviously the current construction equipment isn't, it has a heavy carbon footprint.
As I
But
understand it, right now the number one supplier of lithium is Australia. But guess who owns the lithium oil processing plants in Australia?
China.
Thank you.
oh, yep.
Just like where the solar panels come from.
Right, yeah. And it's all about trying to gain that energy independence, which is a part of
A year or so ago.
I don't know. The electrification process is about gaining that back, because right now we are, some positives and some negatives. We are a very globalized supply chain, and that's something that will continue to improve as countries do look inward for resources, and also as we look for more more simplified compounds for our batteries. That is a major goal. Lithium is certainly simple, but you're talking about the rare earth metals that we saw, which is the advantage of that LFP. But you source them from certain.
Yeah, source them from places in Africa where basically slave miners.
Right. Yeah, and that's another issue that the supply chains are having right now, is that they're obviously, companies got found out that they were using that source of lithium, and in a very positive way. Now we're pulling out of that, or at least some of them are pulling out of it. Yeah. So, any other questions?
Yeah, there's. I was on a blog. I've been following Bavarian, Ford, and now Chevy. The trucks, everybody's going crazy over. And there's, my mind's gonna put blank on me now. I lost it. Maybe it'll come back to me. I'll have to think about it for a second.
Oh, that's okay. No problem. I can check actually I don't know if we had anyone asking questions in the chat here. Let's see. Like I said, we do have people watching online, so Dr. Gaidash from right here at Kopernik says heater / air conditioning impact on range. There is certainly an impact, especially if you have that resistance heater. For me, I see a decent hit. In the summertime, I get 200 miles of range. In the wintertime, because I run the heater and on top of batteries becoming less efficient in the colder temperatures, I lose that 30 miles. Thankfully, the EPA range when I was researching the cars was rated at 170. So that's what I get in the wintertime. In the summertime, I get more than I expected at 200. So that's nice. But I don't run the AC as often in the summer. I try to avoid it. Roll the windows down just because. Because I can, and I can live with it. It's not so, like you'll lose like maybe 15 miles of range if you're running the AC on a commute. Then and of course that becomes less of an issue when you have a higher range vehicle. Okay. Art, another Kopernik educator, asks, fans, blowers, wipers, heater, defroster, is there usable heat like in an ICE vehicle? Definitely not as much. Of course, the gas engine, it's good we source heat from the engine. Like I said, there's a lot of energy lost to heat in ICE vehicles, so it's good that we source that for heating in the car. We pull some of that to make it more efficient. But there's definitely not as much to utilize in an EV. Okay. Stacy says, if you drive only a couple days a week and short distances, will the batteries discharge while not in use? So one of the examples I had in the previous show was my car was out in that, was it a 2 or 3 foot snowstorm we had? I can't quite recall. Last year. Oh yeah. So my car was outside during that, and so it was in those cold temperatures. Maybe the snow had some insulating effect. I don't know, but there is something called vampire drain that can happen on EVs. My car did not suffer from that during the cold temperatures when I left it outside. So battery, vampire drain can happen. I haven't experienced any significant amount. So, I mean, you think about the battery as this big reservoir of power. It's not like your cell phone battery where, you leave it on standby, or even, a tablet. You leave it on standby with the screen off, but, right, it's still doing something in there. It will drain, you'll see it drop 10%, 20% as the day goes on. It's thinking about something. But the battery's tiny. The battery in EVs are reservoirs of power when they're just when they're stagnant, when they're just sitting in place. So, and there's not much going on in the vehicle to pull from that battery. So it's mostly a non-issue there.
I remember what I was going to ask you.
Oh yeah.
They came back.
No problem.
One of the fellows on the blog, he's in a state. I'm not in Indiana. I'm not sure. But he's being charged road tax, and he's got an electric vehicle.
Yes, that is something we might see more of as time goes by, because a lot of taxes are, they come from the gas, right? They come at the pump.
That really kind of pissed me off. I read that from him being charged, because he's not paying the gas tax.
Right,
so now
right.
The state has implemented an EV tax for non-gas, engines.
Right, and as EVs become prevalent, reach that 60% level or above, getting taxes for the roads makes some sense there. But when you're trying to incentivize the purchase of EVs, that's not something you want to really see. Any other questions from the audience? Just gonna check one more time to see if I missed anything here. Oh, yeah, Sasha. Yeah, it certainly will if it needs to. The car is set up to run conditioning on the battery itself. Like I said, I've never experienced that, even leaving it out in hot or cold temperatures, but it will pull power running that process if it needs to. Yep. That's where you would see some of the aforementioned vampire drain. Yep. Okay. Last one, I think. What percentage of grid power comes from green energy sources versus fossil fuel? I don't know the national average, and unfortunately I don't know the exact number for New York off the top of my head. But like I said, we saw that figure. Where was it? Right. Yep. We have strong renewables here in upstate New York because of our nuclear and hydro capacity. Here it is. So that figure gives you a sense of what the split is like just purely as it relates to EVs. But of course, it's directly related to the grid. So it's kind of a neat way to look at it in a practical sense. Okay, what is my equivalent MPG in different parts of the country if I just charge my car?
I'd like to see a number for China because their coal generation is the major portion. So it would be horrible.
Sure. Yep. Yep.
On the regen doesn't work unless you are putting your brake on going down the hill, or is it just going down the hill in general, not taking as much foot pedal to keep you at a certain speed?
Yeah, no, I can activate it anytime I want, just like a regular brake. My particular system, if I pull back on the gas pedal, if I let off on it or just remove my foot entirely, that activates regen, and I can set 3 different levels of scale. So level 0 is no regen, level 1 is some, level 2 is mid, and level 3 is the strongest, pulling the most power.
So if you're going down a road that's 40, 55 miles an hour and you let off going downhill, are you going to start slowing down to 50, 45?
Yeah, yep, you could do that. Yep. Yeah, and I even have the option if I wanted to come to a hard stop, like if I was on a flat road approaching a traffic light, I don't even have to use my brake pedal. I can just tap the this little paddle on the left side of my wheel, and that slows my car down to a stop. Some cars are intelligent enough to know once you let off on the gas and it sees a car ahead of you, it knows to stop before it. Mine doesn't do that, but some cars do, and that's called full one pedal driving, where you almost never touch the brake pad or any other device on the car. It's just pushing the gas pedal and pulling back on it. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Well, my daughter's Prius, she only gets electric from 0 to like 20 or 18 or something, and the gas kicks in.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah. Is it just like a regular hybrid?
Must be, because she's not getting that great of gas mileage on it.
Sure. Yeah, I see. That makes some sense. Usually, the just regular hybrids are really great in city driving and low speed, but as soon as you ramp up, it. Yeah. Right. Yeah, you're not idling or anything like that. Yeah, that's right.
On the slide about Norway.
Sure.
Can you go back to the 3 bullet points, the first one?
Oops, sorry, hang on.
What did they do, and what's stopping the United States from doing that?
Let's see, where are we here? What's this one, right?
Right there.
Oh no, too far. There we go. It does. It definitely is political. The reasoning behind it, of course, our current energy infrastructure is heavily based on fossil fuels. And there's a lot of subsidization around that in the United States. But yeah, it's partially a will. Like the Norwegian government just decided this is the path they wanted to go, and there weren't enough conflicts of interest to stop it from happening. And in the end, that's really what it is. There was the motivation, the passion behind it, and the want to do it, and the realization that it would set them up well for the future for a more sustainable Norway in this case.
It's very low on corruption.
Basically,
Yep.
the government is all the bribes,
Yep.
basically the bribing that stopping the government from
Yeah. Yep. That's all it is. It's just the will in the end. All right. Oh yeah.
As far as the question about the clean energy, so I wasn't aware until recently, but you can choose who supplies the energy that is delivered to your house by NYSEG.
Mhm.
You can choose to have like 100% wind or solar sourced energy for your electric bill. So if you wanted to have a zero carbon source for your electricity for your car, you could do that.
Absolutely. So that would just take you from that 306 mpg just infinite, right? You'd be pulling pure renewable. Sure. Yep. All right. Well, I think that was also all the questions in the chat. Thanks for tuning in. And I don't think the skies aren't looking good, right, guys? No. Okay. Oh, just give me 1 second to end the live stream here. No problem. So thanks for watching, everyone. We will see you next time, and hopefully we get some clear skies coming up here.